Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So if you don't know, the original John Carpenter 1978 classic Halloween is my favorite horror film of all time, as well as being one of my personal favorite films, period. However, there isn't just one Halloween, in fact there's actually 13 of them. So I thought, what better way to celebrate the scary movie season than to make a video discussing each and every one of the Halloween films. Yep, all 13 of them, from the John Carpenter 1978 classic to the Rob Zombie remakes to the Blumhouse Requel trilogy directed by David Gordon Green. So, without further ado, let's get started with Halloween. In 1978, John Carpenter carved his way into horror movie history with what would become one of the most iconic films in the genre. That is, of course, Halloween. Originally titled The Babysitter Murders but later changed to capitalize on the popular holiday, the story followed Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, an average 17-year-old girl, as her and her teenage friends are stalked by Michael Myers, a 21-year-old escaped mental patient who stabbed his sister to death 15 years prior and hasn't spoken a word since. As mentioned, this is my favorite horror film of all time. I think it's kind of perfect. Not in a way that means it is without flaws, but in the way that every movie I think sets out to achieve something, and I feel Halloween achieves exactly what it sets out to do. This film was kind of lightning in a bottle, as the blend of gorgeous cinematography by the legend Dean Cundey, strong direction, and a brilliant score by director John Carpenter, and a memorable and iconic slasher villain that many consider to be the shining star of the genre. Everything about this movie works. The atmospheric wide shots and Panaglide aided smooth camera work by Cundey makes every scene intense, as you feel our protagonist is never not being watched. Even when Myers isn't on screen, you always feel like he's lurking behind some door or waiting in the shadows. There's a sense of dread and despair encasing every scene that builds and builds until the final climax, and with a final few minutes that's as traumatizing as it is enthralling. What the first Halloween gets right that the sequels fail to understand is that sometimes less is more, and the simplicity and elegance of the first film is why it remains an all-time classic despite a myriad of uninspired and dull sequels. I always feel weird giving movies scores and videos nowadays, so for this video I'll leave you with a quick summarization for each film. Halloween 1978 is a classic and must-see film, not just for horror fans, but for anyone who appreciates good cinema. It's extremely well crafted, and the timeless score and atmosphere make it the perfect October watch. I watch it every year on Halloween, and I can't wait to watch it again. Released just 3 years after the original, Halloween 2 picks up right where the original film left off. A traumatized Laurie Strode is being taken to the Haddonfield Hospital. Meanwhile, Michael Myers is still on the loose and the hunt begins. I have a lot less to say about this movie, mostly because it's more of the same. John Carpenter does not return as the director and is replaced by Rick Rosenthal, but supposedly had a lot of input on the final edit. Dean Cundey brings back his amazing skills as cinematographer, and Carpenter does supply another score to this film, mixing in old tracks as well as some great new ones. This is one of those sequels where I can recommend it to anyone who enjoys the first. If you're not looking for a sequel that really expands on anything and just gives you a lot of what you liked about the first film, great chase scenes, a strong tone and atmosphere, and like in the case of most slasher sequels, much more blood and gore. While the first film has a body count of 6, this film ups the ante to 10 kills, which kind of plays on what Randy says in Scream 2 for the rules of a horror sequel.
1. The body count is always bigger. Number 2, the death scenes are always much more elaborate. More blood, more gore. Carnage, candy. Your core audience just expects it.
But that being said, there's a lot to still enjoy in this film. As mentioned, there's more kills, and some are even better executed as the film has a higher budget. One in particular is great, where Michael drowns one of the nurses in the hot tub, and every time her head is pulled back up, more and more skin is burned off of her. I like that Dean Cundey adds in some different colors in this film, using the hospital as a way to introduce red into the shots, which gives it a nice visual contrast from the stark blue color palette that he used in a lot of the first film. Dr. Sam Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, returns, whom I didn't mention yet but is one of the best parts of all of these films. Even in the later ones when he acts batshit crazy, he still usually is giving the best performance, and this film is no different. I liked seeing the fallout from the first film as well. Seeing Chief Brackett learn of Annie's death makes the events of the first film all the more horrible. As mentioned, the chase scenes are still great, very well shot and directed, and very well edited as well. I swear, rewatching it this time around, the scene where Jimmy enters the car with Laurie and then passes out onto the car steering wheel, activating the horn, was one of the most tense scenes I've seen in a long time. All in all, it's a lot of what's great about the first film, but doesn't really hit the same sweet spot, as since it's a lot of what we've already seen, it just doesn't hit as hard the second time around. I will say it's still a really enjoyable sequel and works well in tandem with the first film. I definitely say check it out if you enjoy the first, and if you're looking for a good double feature, this works as a nice 1-2 punch after watching the original. I'd say the best viewing experience would definitely be late October on a cold fall night, leaves blowing, watch the first film, order some pizza or get some snacks, take a break, eat, then watch Halloween 2. It'll be a really great night. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, or otherwise known as the one without Michael, released only 1 year after Halloween 2, and the last film in the franchise to feature the stellar visuals of cinematographer Dean Cundey. Like most people, the first time I watched this as an unsuspecting youth, I absolutely hated it. A Halloween movie without Michael Myers? Who okayed that? Though, after what would happen with most of the sequels, I kind of understand why John Carpenter wanted the Halloween movies to be an anthology series, and when you rewatch the first Halloween with that mindset, it becomes pretty clear that Michael Myers as a character was never meant to appear again. However, once I got into high school, a good friend of mine who shares an affinity for the film encouraged me to watch it again under the eyes of a standalone film, to view it without the negative impact of wanting to see Michael Myers again. At that moment, I kind of fell in love with this movie. The weird and sadistic plot, a score that might rival or even surpass that of the 1978 original, and a standout performance by Dan O'Herlihy as Connell Cochran.
You don't really know much about Halloween. You thought no further than the strange custom of having your children wear masks and go out begging for candy.
The film has an excellent pace to it for the most part, and features some really great kills that go overlooked in the franchise solely because they are not committed by Michael Myers. In fact, one of the kills early on in the film stands as one of my favorite on-screen kills in a horror film. Upon my recent viewing, there are some really stupid plot elements and things that straight up don't make any sense. Tom Atkins' protagonist is also a really unlikable and often creepy character that isn't exactly the most fun to follow, and while I don't love this film as much as I did in high school, I still think it stands as one of the better entries in the franchise that has a lot to offer. All in all, I think if you're doing a binge of the franchise, you may be able to skip this one if you're only looking for Michael Myers action. But if you're looking for a really fun and inherently twisted standalone Halloween film that also excels at capturing the spooky season atmosphere, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch may be a film that you want to check out or give another chance to if you've hated on it in the past. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, takes place 10 years after the original and was also released in 1988. After a long hiatus between films and fans of the franchise disappointment with the lack of Michael Myers, 6 years after the release of Halloween 3, the white mask-wearing, babysitter-stalking serial killer returns to Haddonfield. This time the franchise ditches Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode and instead shifts the focus to her now orphaned daughter Jamie Lloyd, played by Danielle Harris. To her credit, I think Danielle Harris does a lot with this script and turns in a pretty convincing performance for a child actor. She's not the best at line delivery at this young of an age, but she convincingly plays the part of a scared kid well enough. Donald Pleasence continues being one of the best parts of this franchise, and I sort of just love seeing him get progressively more and more batshit insane as these films go along. Halloween 4 also has one of the best opening credits to any horror film ever, and if you need a film to immediately get you into the spooky season mood, the opening title credits of this movie will absolutely accomplish that. The film also introduces the Cult of Thorn plotline that'll be explored and expanded upon in the next 2 installments. The biggest thing that frustrates me about this film, and it may sound like a nitpick, but it's one that plagues a lot of the Halloween movies, is they somehow mess the mask up. In this one, the eye holes are massive and it makes Michael look like a bad cosplayer instead of a serial killer. This isn't a great movie, and it starts to really fall into the tropes and cliches of slashers. However, the atmosphere and tone are pretty consistent. The absence of John Carpenter, and especially the loss of cinematographer Dean Cundey, really hurt the overall look and feel of the film. Since this is the first in the franchise not shot by Cundey, the boring visuals really make the film look cheaper than the previous films despite having a larger budget. They also start to add more supernatural elements into the franchise as Michael becomes more of an unstoppable monster, and they also include a psychic link between Michael and Jamie that feels a bit out of place and strange. I will say though, outside of the original film, this has perhaps my favorite ending to a Michael Myers-centered Halloween film. Overall, there's some decent kills, another great Donald Pleasence performance, a solid new protagonist, and a Halloween atmosphere that is unparalleled in the franchise. They really nail the vibes of the Halloween season, but in the end it lacks the craftsmanship of the earlier films that made them a cut above most slashers. I'd say if you're just fixing for more Michael Myers, then you can watch this film, but if you've stopped after 2 or 3, you're really not going to miss that much. Released just 1 year after the previous entry, Halloween 5: Revenge of Michael Myers continues the story of Jamie Lloyd, the daughter of Laurie Strode, and also continues the Cult of Thorn plotline. This is the first movie in the series that you'll hear me use this phrase for. This is a goddamn cartoon movie. This movie is so unbelievably silly at times that I thought someone was pranking me while I was watching it. I haven't seen this movie since I was like 14, so it's been a while, and when I say my mouth was open wide in disbelief for most of the runtime, I genuinely mean it. Everything that happens in this film is either boring, ridiculous, or straight up annoying. Speaking of annoying, let's meet the most obnoxious Halloween character in existence. Now, anyone who's made a video about this film has mentioned the character of Tina, and rightfully so. Every time she's on screen, I was just asking myself, why is she like this? Who acts like this? This cannot be a real person. Tina aside, Loomis is an absolute nutbag in this film. If you haven't seen this movie, I will be spoiling this in part 4 briefly, but I have to discuss this. At the end of Halloween 4, after Jamie touches Michael's hand, the psychic link grows stronger between them, which is a huge plot point of this movie. At the end of Halloween 4 though, Jamie, after surviving Michael, puts on a clown costume similar to the one Michael wore in the beginning of the original, and proceeds to attack her adoptive mother with a knife in a very similar way to how Michael attacks his sister Judith. Because of this, Jamie has fallen mute, which is already stupid enough, but in this film, Dr. Loomis is next level batshit crazy and spends most of the runtime in this film yelling, and I do mean absolutely yelling, at an 11-year-old girl who can't speak. There's also these goofball cop characters that are treated like complete bumbling idiots. You tell me, would a scene like this be in any other movie but a cartoon?
All clear. Nothing above, nothing below.
Like, what was that? There's no sense of atmosphere or tension, nothing is even remotely scary or frightening. Even the kills in this movie are boring and forgettable in comparison to the rest of the franchise. There's also this man in black that just randomly shows up in scenes throughout the film that goes completely unexplained until the following film, so you're just left super confused. The ending of this one is also just a ripoff of Halloween 2, and overall, I kind of hate this movie. I can't in good faith recommend this to anyone. It's not even fun bad, it's just boring and silly, but not in an entertaining way. I mean, if you're just trying to watch all these movies, I can't stop you, but I don't really understand anyone enjoying this one unless you've had a drink or 7. So some heavy spoilers for this one, but it's hard to talk about this movie without mentioning the plot. Released in 1995, 6 years after Halloween 5, Halloween 6: The Curse of Michael Myers, or otherwise known as the one with Paul Rudd. Yes, that's right, sexiest man of the year, Ant-Man himself, Paul Rudd, is in the film as Tommy Doyle, a grown-up version of the little boy that Laurie Strode babysat in the first film, which inherently is kind of a neat setup, and if the film had focused on him as the protagonist and just dealt with the trauma and lasting impact of being attacked as a young boy, then maybe Halloween 6 wouldn't be a steaming pile of dog shit. I will say this movie is slightly better than the previous film on 2 merits alone. It's slightly more entertaining than Part 5 and at least has some very small semblance of atmosphere to it. The 5th film doesn't even feel like it takes place in October or anywhere near Halloween other than some brief decorations. The film picks up several years after the events of Halloween 5, where it is revealed that a secret society known as the Cult of Thorn kidnapped Jamie Lloyd and also is sort of in control of Michael Myers. It's revealed through flashbacks that the cult used Michael to impregnate Jamie, which has me asking so many questions. First off, is it implied that Michael raped his own niece? Which is already a reason to hate this movie, and if not sexual assault, then they would have had to use Michael's semen to impregnate Jamie. In which case, How did they get Michael's sperm? Was someone in charge of... I don't even want to think about that. These are not questions I should ever be asking in a Halloween movie. Either way, Jamie in this film dies no matter whether you watch the theatrical cut or the widely discussed producer's cut, which I've seen both. It doesn't matter, they both suck. The only difference with Jamie is that in the theatrical cut she's killed immediately by Michael, in the producer's cut she survives the attack, but is then just shot dead in the hospital by the Man in Black later on in the film. This film also tries to come up with a reason why Michael kills, and their explanation is that several Haddonfield residents are a part of this ancient cult of Thorn. This cult placed a curse on Michael when he was a child that drives him to kill the members of his family on Halloween night, the night of Samhain. I don't know if it's ever explained why they placed this curse on Michael or what the cult achieves through him killing his family, but who cares? No longer is Michael an escaped mental patient who stalks babysitters, and no longer is he even just an evil maniac who tries to murder his sister/niece. No, now he's just some minion being used by some cult. For me, this really just ruins Michael Myers. Part of why the original two films work so well, especially the first, is the lack of explanation. Michael Myers is the embodiment of evil. He has no rhyme or reason for what he does. This film completely removes all of that in favor of some stupid and lame explanation for why Michael has killed all of the people he has. Either way, this movie is dumb, the characters are dumb, they introduce an abusive stepfather character that is such a mustache-twirling villain that I feel like I'm watching a James Bond film. Oh yeah, and the leader of this cult, Dr. Wynn, or the Man in Black who popped up a few times in the last film, is supposedly this guy from the first Halloween movie. Why? Overall, just don't watch this movie. That's my summarization. It's not fun, you won't enjoy yourself, this isn't even a cartoon movie. This is just a bad, boring film. If you want an example of how not to make a Halloween movie, watch this one. Halloween Water, 20 years later, was released in 1998. It is the first reboot/retcon that we have in the Halloween franchise. We completely ditched the Cult of Thorn storyline, and this film is a direct sequel to the first two Halloween films. In this new timeline, Laurie Strode never had a daughter named Jamie Lloyd and never died in a mysterious car crash. Instead, she moved to California, changed her name to Carrie Tate, and became the headmistress of a prep school. In this new timeline, she also has a son named John, who's a senior at that very school. Now, I remember watching this back when I first got into the Halloween films, and I remember thinking it was a fine enough movie, but upon rewatch, I actually really enjoyed it this time. A lot more than I thought I would. It's by no means a masterpiece, but in my opinion presents us with more of the Michael Myers and Laurie Strode that I personally enjoy. Spoilers from the 2018 film, but I really didn't buy into the whole Laurie Strode turning into Sarah Connor from the Terminator films, especially since that film is a direct sequel to only Halloween 1978, ignoring the events of the second film. Halloween 2018 turns Laurie into this trauma-riddled recluse who can't move on with her life, whereas Halloween H20 presents us with a much more realistic version of the character. This Laurie Strode is clearly still traumatized from the events that happened, but she also has a life, she has a good successful job, she's kind of funny at times, and even has a nice little budding romance. She's clearly trying to move on but is still stuck in the past, but it doesn't completely restrict her from actually living a life. And they give her a legitimate character arc. She starts out running from her fears and hiding from the past, but makes an active choice in the climax of the film to stop running and face her fears. Laurie locking herself in the school with Michael screaming out his name to finally face him down as the Carpenter Halloween score kicks in is just way more badass than whatever they have going on in Halloween 2018. I also really enjoyed the dynamic between Laurie and her son John in this film. Again, their dynamic and interactions are just way more interesting and make way more sense than her relationship with Karen or Allison in the 2018 film. Keeping the second film canon and keeping Michael and Laurie as brother and sister also just makes this movie make more sense, as it gives a plausible reason why he'd go after Laurie again 20 years later. And one thing I think that goes underappreciated in this film is that Laurie actually does the smart thing after the events of the original two films and not only leaves Haddonfield, but changes her fucking name. In 2018, why in the hell would this version of Laurie, who can't even live a normal life because of her trauma, still fucking live in Haddonfield? Either way, Halloween H20 is paced really well, being just under 90 minutes. It gets to the action quickly. There's some nice touches to the music as the piano melody sounds ghostly as the effects of Michael's actions have lingered in Laurie's life. There's some really solid kills in this movie, and they also get the look and feel of the film to be much more in line with the original than the last few sequels had. I also think the ending of the film is super satisfying. Spoilers, but I love at the end that you think it's over and Laurie decides, fuck it, I'm tired of letting the police fuck this up, I'm gonna take Michael out myself. So it ends with her pinning Michael down with a van and then decapitating him with an axe. Overall, this is genuinely one of the better Halloween films, both from a story perspective and from a filmmaking standpoint. It has a satisfying conclusion to Michael and Laurie's story, so satisfying that if someone asked what the most complete way to watch the Halloween films is, I'd recommend watching the original 2 Halloween films from 1978 and 1981, and then watching H20 as a nice bookend to an unofficial trilogy. So yeah, if you want your own nice little Halloween trilogy, watch Halloween 1, Halloween 2, and Halloween H20. I think it'll work out great for you. Great. We're back to the cartoon movies. This isn't even a Halloween movie. Halloween Resurrections was released in 2002 and is, I guess, a sequel to Halloween H20. This one retcons the ending of the last film by saying that before Michael's body was loaded up, he knocked out one of the EMTs, took out his vocal cords, and put the mask on him. So it wasn't actually Michael that Laurie decapitated, but instead an innocent EMT. So now Michael tracks down Laurie, who's now in a mental asylum, and the two have a final showdown in which Laurie is killed, but not before kissing Michael on the lips and telling him she'll see him in hell. Jesus Christ. Like I said, this isn't a Halloween movie. This is an early 2000s slasher cash grab that has nothing to do with the Halloween franchise, but threw Michael Myers in to sell tickets. While I didn't mention it, rapper LL Cool J is in Halloween H20, but in a very reduced role that's often for comedic relief, and honestly, it kinda works. Surely, it's a little goofy, but every so often, they'll cut back to him writing a romantic novel, and it's cheeky but kind of charming. I guess the creators of this film saw that and decided they needed another rapper in this franchise because Resurrections includes Busta Rhymes as one of the main characters. The plot revolves around this company run by Busta Rhymes called Dangertainment, who has selected a couple of young, unsuspecting college kids to live stream themselves searching through Michael Myers' childhood home. So what we're treated to is probably the largest cast of unlikable characters that we've met in this franchise. Hey wait, isn't that Kevin from American Pie?
Penises remain flaccid and unused. We will fight for every man out there who isn't getting laid and should be.
I wonder what he's up to these days. Either way, nearly every character in this film is just god-awful and ruins every scene that they're in. There's a weird subplot where one of the main characters in this house, one of the girls, has been unknowingly messaging this high school student on some chat room, and this is just some lazy excuse to have it so that later on, when he's at a high school party, he can put it on the TV and watch these characters get axed off. Which is hilarious because by the end of the film, the entire party of high schoolers is watching the live stream, and it's just funny to see like 30 plus high schoolers crammed into a tiny room watching these people get brutally murdered. The livestream element is so painfully early 2000s, and it treats us to some really shitty low quality footage. It was such a lame attempt at trying to, I guess, modernize the Halloween franchise, but again, it really just feels like they had this script about characters getting killed on some livestream event, and then realized it wouldn't make any money, so they attached Michael Myers to put butts into seats. I will say, this movie does cross into so bad it's good territory, because is this movie awful in every single way? Yes it is. But does it have Busta Rhymes making karate noises and kung fu kicking Michael Myers out a window? Yes it does. A good 20 minutes of this film is also just gross creepy guys trying to fuck these girls and then get rejected repeatedly. Like, they get turned down so frequently that you'd think at some point these guys would take a hint. They're also just being so creepy while on live stream for several people to watch, which is so funny to me. One of the funniest parts of this film too is that Busta Rhymes at one point dresses up as Michael to scare these kids and give the viewers something interesting to watch, but he runs into the real Michael, at which point Busta Rhymes goes on what feels like a 5 to 10 minute rant and annoys Michael so much that he doesn't even kill Busta, he just walks away. This movie's ridiculous. The ending is also hilarious as Busta Rhymes throughout the entire film is trying to take advantage of these college kids and profit off people's curiosity with horrible tragedies, but then in the final scene makes some big speech about how it's wrong and gets mad at the interviewers and news reporters for doing their job, even though he was doing the same thing the entire film. This might be the worst Michael Myers mask too. Like, what is this? How do so many of these sequels fuck this up? This is like the easiest thing to get right, and somehow it's the most inconsistent part of this franchise. Surprisingly enough, I would recommend this movie. This is the movie that you throw on when you have several friends coming over during October. You grab as much alcohol or as much weed as you can, and you just sit back and you have a good time. If this film is good for anything, it's definitely good for a few laughs. So guys, I initially planned on doing all the Halloween movies in one video, but for the sake of this video not being too long, I think I'll split it into 2 parts. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll tackle the Rob Zombie remakes as well as the new David Gordon Green trilogy. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did like the video, make sure to click the like button, subscribe if you want to hear more from me, and make sure to hit the bell notification button so you get notified when I post new videos. Make sure to also check out the horror podcast I host called Scared Speechless. I host it with my good buddy Aaron. We have a new episode out every Monday, and you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. I will leave a link in the description down below. Happy October, and as always, I will see you guys on the next video.
One of the ladies, the older ladies who used to be like burlesque dancers or whatever, in the real world, has some of the biggest animated titties.
I
Bro.
knew at some point we would get to this.